Thank you for joining us. Debbie Turner-Bell has the day off. A wet and blustery storm along the eastern coast of the United States is making driving hazardous and has tangled up hundreds of flights. This all Wednesday in the middle of the Thanksgiving travel frenzy. But so far, it's not the all-out gridlock that many had feared. The storm dropped up to a foot of snow on parts of Pennsylvania and western New York. For the most part, it unleashed wind-driven rain along the northeast, heavily populated Interstate 95 corridor from Richmond, Virginia to the tip of Maine. Flight cancellations piled up at the eastern coast hubs. The ripple effect meant that the delays spread across the country and even abroad for flights to and from the United States. Now, by the time the front leaves the country early on Thanksgiving, it will have affected 58 million people. The lingering question for television viewers and New Yorkers is whether the strong gusty winds will ground the giant, colorful cartoon character balloons at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Now, a total number of cancellations within, into, or out of the United States today so far, 253. That according to FlightAware.com. Joining us now to update us on the situation is that company's CEO, Daniel Baker, who is in Houston, Texas. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Now, we know, at least we know now, about your wonderful device called the Misery Map. So how does it work and what is it showing us now?
Well, FlightAware aggregates hundreds of real-time data sources around the world, from airlines, air traffic control data, to airline data that we receive via our own antennas, and we figure out if flights are on time, where they are, where they're going, and when they're going to get there. So on the Misery Map on FlightAware.com, we take all that data and we make an animated map with real-time weather, so we can show what impact the weather has on the major airports around the country. From there, you can look at what the routes are between airports and if those flights are delayed or on time. And it gives you a sense of how much misery you're going to experience when you're traveling, which today is likely quite a bit given the weather on the East Coast.
Now, some of that misery factor is generally connected to, pardon the pun, but connecting flights. Do you have advice for people when it comes to taking those particular kinds of flights during this time of year?
Well, this time of year and in particular today, it's tough to not experience a delay. There was really bad weather earlier this week in Dallas and Chicago, huge hubs for American Airlines, Southwest, and United, and today up and down the East Coast. So it's affecting virtually every major airline. U.S. Airways in Charlotte, United Airlines in DC and in Newark. So it's really hard to avoid. The thing that we provide is the ability to know what the impact is going to be, what your options are, and know about problems before they affect you. You certainly don't want to show up at the airport and find out at that point that your flight's delayed or your flight's canceled. So FlightAware can give you information ahead of time. That way, if you want to go into the airline's website and perhaps reschedule your flight, fly the night before, maybe take a connection that's through a city that isn't so impacted by the weather, we kind of empower you to make those decisions and figure out what's going on without really relying on the airline employees telling you after something's already impacted you.
Now, we talked about the storm in the northeast part of America, but what airports fall into the category of the worst hit?
Yeah, so today it's basically the whole northeastern United States. So you have DC and Philly who are in really bad shape, New York, Boston, that entire area. And so the good news is not a lot of cancellations. Like you said, about 250 cancellations. Most of those were regional airlines to and from the New York City area this morning. However, right now we have 5,900 delayed flights today. And of course, it's only about 6 o'clock on the East Coast of the United States. So that's quite a few delayed flights. Most of those delayed flights are in and out of Dulles, the New York area airports, and Boston.
And talk to us. We can see here that it's the United States map that you have, but this has a ripple effect overseas, doesn't it?
Yeah, you know, the airlines try and avoid having a big impact on international operations. I think that typically they have a little more buffer room on those flights, but you could see some minor delays, 30 minutes, 60 minutes on flights to and from the U.S. from elsewhere that's affected. But certainly across the nation, this is a multi-day impact because it's really hard for the airlines to isolate the impact from these kinds of storms, where all of a sudden you have all the hubs up and down the East Coast being impacted by weather. And it can be a surprise. right, so there's folks that are flying from Los Angeles to San Francisco this evening that say, hey, I feel bad for the guys on the East Coast, but everything's beautiful here. And then they're surprised when their flight's delayed. But it can be that the airplane servicing that route maybe came from New York earlier in the day, and it was multi-hour delays getting out of there, and it takes a day or two for the whole airline network to catch up from that.
Now, you talked before about getting to the airport and finding out then that the flight is delayed, but the airlines have done a pretty good job of using technology to kind of keep that from happening with you getting emails now from the airlines or text messages or even phone calls. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, the airlines do a good job of that. We think that we're a little bit more proactive and provide a bigger picture. But either way, everyone's working together. And of course, we receive data from the airlines, and we're also a provider back to the airlines. And that's the beauty of the technology and everyone having smartphones and the internet, that this information can get out there ahead of time. I think that certainly the goal for the airlines is to get everyone where they want to go on time. However, that can be difficult to do if you can't reach your customers. And I think 10 or 15 years ago, it was typical to go to the airport and wait, go to the airport and talk to an airline employee. And now you can find out about a delay 4 hours, 6 hours, maybe even 12 hours ahead of time. Go online and fix it yourself. And that's a huge improvement, because if you're given the option of showing up at the airport and maybe waiting 2 or 3 hours versus going to the airport an hour early, taking a connection and getting to where you want to go on time, everyone's going to choose the latter.
Daniel Baker, CEO of FlightAware.com, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.